It's a great pleasure to be with you, all of you, for today's announcement. It's especially rewarding knowing that in just a few minutes, let's see, there's the clock right there, that we'll learn of the Kavli Prize recipients. The biennial Kavli Prize, as Brian said, recognizes scientists for seminal advances in research in the fields of astrophysics, nanotechnology, and nanoscience, and neuroscience. So I welcome the suspense, and I hope all of you do. And prematurely, I want to congratulate all the winners, the laureates. The founder of the Kavli Prizes was, of course, the late Fred Kavli, Norwegian-born scientist and engineer, entrepreneur, and philanthropist, whose foundation has supported research centers, an international program of conferences, symposia, endowed professorships, the AAAS Science Journalism Awards, and the prizes that bear his name. In a few short years, the prizes have attained worldwide prestige, which is reflected in the impressive outpouring of science, educators, and media here today. I had the honor and pleasure of knowing Fred Kavli before he was known as Fred Kavli. And it was during a period when he was wondering how he could get the world to recognize scientific achievement and innovation and its benefits to our quality of life. I'll say more about this singular person and his legacy in just a bit. I'm proud to represent the National Science Foundation, which, as you know, is the primary funder of basic scientific research. We share some important goals with the Kavli Foundation, including that we're deeply committed to curiosity-driven, potentially transformative scientific exploration. Every year, we engage the talents of hundreds of thousands of scientists, engineers, researchers, educators, and students. We invest in universities and colleges that lead to cutting-edge developments and new technologies and industries. We invest in the youth of today to create the STEM professionals of tomorrow, contributing to our country's skilled workforce. And we also invest in international partnerships that enable significant scientific research. Our global collaborations have accelerated the progress of science and improvements in health, science, and prosperity throughout the world. We never lose sight of our obligation to explore the unexplored. And I see, looking around this room, that there are many explorers here. We consistently support research that's driven by curiosity and imagination. An example of this was played out on the world stage a few months ago in an announcement that went viral. 100 years after Einstein published his theory of general relativity, NSF-funded researchers announced the first ever observation of gravitational waves, ripples in the fabric of space-time, caused by two rather large black holes colliding 1.3 billion light years away. The gravitational waves were detected by the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, or LIGO, which NSF began funding in some form in the 1970s and was completed in its present form only last year. Every discovery marks a moment in time when knowledge, theory, and technology come together. And if science isn't prepared for it, it could very well miss the discovery. Sometimes I wonder what we're missing today simply because we're not quite prepared. LIGO is a reminder that we as scientists don't know what we don't know. I'm reminded of what Isaac Newton once observed about his scientific explorations. Quote, "I've been a boy playing on the seashore, diverting myself with a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me." NSF is dedicated to helping all of science continue to explore that great undiscovered ocean of truth, and that continues to hold treasures for those who dedicate themselves to exploring it. LIGO research is being carried out by an international consortium of more than 1,000 scientists from universities around the United States and in 14 other countries. Eventually, with a global network of such detectors, we'll be able to more accurately determine the locations and origins of sources of intense gravitational waves, shedding light on a dark universe. Eventually, as our scientific instrumentation and computation vastly improve in sensitivity and capability, we will detect new cosmic phenomena which bring with them new and larger mysteries. We know precious little, for example, of the nature of 95% of the mass energy content of the universe. Now we've come to a special moment in understanding our universe. For the first time in history, we can explore its mysteries in 3 regimes: the electromagnetic regime, the particle regime, and the gravitational regime. As an astrophysicist myself, I cannot tell you how exciting I find the prospects of this new era for cosmology, one of the 3 areas of scientific research that will be recognized by the Kavli Prize announcement today. However, let me note that NSF is committed to all 3 of these areas. For example, last October, I joined NIH Director Tom Insel at the White House for the special Kavli Foundation event, where a new commitment to the President's Brain Initiative was announced. NSF has welcomed the President's multifaceted approach of drawing on the expertise of foundations, private sector companies, research universities and health systems, and philanthropies to partner with government agencies in implementing the Brain Initiative. For more than 30 years, NSF investments have catalyzed discoveries in brain structure, development, function, cognition, and behavior. Our support for key research and data infrastructure has led to technical breakthroughs such as optogenetics and other advanced experimental and imaging techniques that are revolutionizing the study of brains across many organisms. NSF has supported research priorities that have led to innovations, including brain-machine interfaces designed to restore lost function due to injury or disease, such as the first FDA-approved artificial retina and the Clarity technique for visualizing neural pathways in preserved brains. And in the field of nanoscience, NSF has been a pioneer in fostering the development of nanotechnology. Just last September, we launched the new National Nanotechnology Coordinated Infrastructure Program to advance research in nanoscale science, engineering, and technology. 16 sites will provide researchers from academia, government, and companies, large and small, with access to university user facilities with leading-edge fabrication and characterization tools, instrumentation, and expertise within all disciplines of nanoscale science, engineering, and technology. And in the broader view, of course, NSF supports fundamental research in every field of science and engineering. We fund proposals primarily in fundamental research that we hope over time will lead to major scientific breakthroughs. And we also have a significant interest in bringing the results of basic research into the marketplace, so we have a number of programs to do faster translation. Over the years, the list of technological advances that NSF has made possible or influenced includes computers, the internet, Doppler radar, MRI scanning technology, laser eye surgery, barcodes, touchscreen technology, DNA fingerprinting, fiber optics, radio frequency identification, speech recognition, the global positioning system, 3D printing, and a lot more. It's a record we're clearly proud of, and it's a record that Fred Kavli praised during his life, even as he launched his own efforts to encourage breakthrough scientific research. Fred was born in Moen, Norway, a deep green valley with high granite cliffs nestled between a lake and the ocean. Through ingenuity and invention, he became a wealthy man. Yet you'd never know that if you met him at a physics talk or casual dinner, as I first did. He was warm and down to earth. He had a big smile, a curious smile, and a gentle humor, and asked a lot of questions, especially following lectures at the UCSB Institute for Theoretical Physics, as it was known then. He prided himself on asking the right questions. He was equally at ease making business decisions at Kavli Co., the company he founded in Oxnard, California, and climbing the rocky outcrops of his native Norway. And he loved his home in Santa Barbara, where he would watch the waves slowly break against the cliff that was his backyard. And in fact, he once calculated for me the rate that the cliff was receding and would be at his doorstep. His home was full of original art and hand-tooled furnishings, all carefully selected by Fred himself. Fred was fascinated with science and wanted to use his wealth to benefit society. He thought carefully about how best to do this. He did his homework. He aspired to invest always in quality. He made his investment decisions in philanthropy thoughtfully, with the same attention to detail that he applied to the aeronautical and automotive sensors that he invented. And the rest is all that we rejoice in now, the discoveries made by the centers and the people who wear the title Kavli. The Kavli Foundation and its many exciting endeavors, including the Kavli Prizes, represent a fitting legacy for this man. He would be very proud to see the growing attention that scientific achievement receives with every passing year. Fred lives on in the prizes in the foundation that bear his name and in the scientific research that he did so much to foster and encourage. But I believe that Fred's true legacy resides in the people in this room, in the Oslo City Hall right now, in those who will be viewing this morning's announcement on television, and in those who have been inspired by his enthusiasm for basic science and his potential. So look around you. Look at those in this room. Everyone here has had her or his life touched in some way by Fred Kavli's vision and generosity. So in that spirit, may I say thank you again for the opportunity to be part of this special event. And hopefully, I brought us all closer to the big moment of the announcement. Thank you very much.
Welcome to Oslo. We are here on this glorious June day to celebrate the finest scientific minds and the best scientific research. Hello to all of our friends around the world, and especially those in New York at the World Science Festival, which is kickstarting this celebration. And it really is a celebration. In just a few minutes, we'll be discovering who has won the Kavli Prizes for 2016. Now, this is the 5th time that we have stood here, every other year since 2008. And earlier today, 9 scientists from around the world received a phone call from here in Oslo, letting them know that they had joined the ranks of the great past Kavli Laureates. The prize is a collaboration between the Kavli Foundation, the Norwegian government, and the Norwegian Academy of Science and Letters, which is where we're standing right now. International committees are selected by the Academy, and they spend many months carefully and secretly choosing every single laureate. And I think we are ready to go. The Academy President, Ola Søyestad, is about to make the announcement. So let's go and hear what he has to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a great day for science. Indeed, it is a great day for excellence in science. Welcome to the announcement of the 2016 Kavli Prizes. Today, we are honoring great scientists in 3 categories for work that has provided us with new tools and new ways of thinking about astrophysics, nanoscience, and neuroscience. In the words of the founder of the prizes, the late Fred Kavli, today we honor the science of the largest, the smallest, and the most complex. Now, let's move on to the announcements themselves. For the discovery of mechanisms that allow experience to remodel brain function, the Norwegian Academy of Science and Letters awards the 2016 Kavli Prize in Neuroscience to Yves Marder, Brandeis University, USA, Michal Lipson, University of California, San Francisco, USA, and to Carla Schatz, Stanford University, USA. Many congratulations to the 3 new neuroscience laureates. To elaborate on the choice, please let me introduce the chair of the Kavli Prize Committee in Neuroscience, Professor Ole Petter Ottersen. Ole Petter, if you please.
Every taste, sight, smell, sound, and experience changes our brains. Neurons make new connections with sensory experience and prune others. Our brains have a remarkable capacity to adapt to changes in the environment and to form memories. What we also know is that our personality and behaviors typically remain fixed as we pass through life. It is the elucidation of this delicate balance between plasticity and stability that we celebrate in the 2016 Kavli Prize for Neuroscience. Yves Marder used the simple neural circuits in crustaceans to elucidate the dynamic interplay between flexibility and stability in the nervous system. She identified the signals that reconfigure the output of adult neurons without altering their underlying anatomy. The work of Michal Lipson has demonstrated that sensory circuits in the cerebral cortex are reorganized by experience in adulthood. Lipson showed that after injury, simply expanding or limiting the use of different fingers leads to a corresponding change in the representation of the hand in the brain. He also showed that the auditory cortex changes its map of sound frequencies after individuals learn to detect fine differences in pitch. This discovery helps explain how humans can recover their perception of speech with cochlear implants. Lipson showed that both neurochemicals as well as cognitive factors, such as attention, can determine whether plasticity takes place in adults. This work is being used to maximize learning and recovery following brain injury and disease. Carla Schatz showed how patterns of activity in the developing brain sculpt the arrangement of synapses between neurons. Her work demonstrated that the formation of connections between the eye and the brain of mammals depends on neuronal activity before birth. She showed that spontaneous waves of activity sweep across the retina early in development, and that these patterns fine-tune the final set of connections from a genetically determined map. Her discovery that neurons that fire together, wire together, links brain wiring during development to the circuitry underlying adult learning and memory. Yves Marder, Carla Schatz, and Michal Lipson have unraveled how the brain changes as we develop in the womb and in adulthood, yet at the same time maintains it in a reliable state. Their work has enlightened the question of how our brains remain stable while allowing for substantive changes during development and learning. The picture of how we experience the world around us has been utterly redrawn.
And now, from the most complex to the very smallest. For the invention of atomic force microscopy, a breakthrough in measurement technology and nanosculpting, the Norwegian Academy of Science and Letters awards the 2016 Kavli Prize in Nanoscience to Gert Binnig, the IBM Zurich Research Laboratory in Switzerland, Christoph Gerber, University of Basel, Switzerland, and to Calvin Quaid, Stanford University, USA. Congratulations to the 3 new Nanoscience laureates. The Nanoscience Committee is chaired by Professor Arne Brattås. Arne, if you please.
Thank you. Sculpting with atoms has been a long-standing dream of nanoscience. To position single atoms on any surface, one by one, would enable the design and creation of revolutionary new structures. The invention and creation of atomic force microscopy, or AFM, has transformed those dreams into reality. Imaging atomic structures in a wide range of material systems was another visionary concept. Based on this technique, sculpting and analyzing nanoscale structures is now widely used in the fields of physics, chemistry, biology, and materials science. In AFM, a nanoscale tip scans across a sample surface at atomically close range. The tiny forces between the sample and the tip are detected, and these forces reveal many properties of the sample, such as the arrangement of its individual atoms, now with atomic resolution. Electric and magnetic interactions, friction, and chemical bonding can induce these forces. The technique is applicable over a wide temperature range and in magnetic fields. And crucially, atomic force microscopy can also be applied to anything, including non-conducting materials such as liquids and biological systems. Nanosculpting is a process of adding, arranging, and removing individual atoms. The tip provides an adaptable tool for accomplishing that level of control. Being able to manipulate conductors and insulators at the nanoscale has applications comparable to those of nanoscale 3D printing. The techniques can be used to control the surface of materials with atomic precision. For example, it is possible to swap atoms one by one at surfaces. Force microscopy-based techniques have created new devices in nanoelectronics, nanophotonics, and nanomagnetism. The advantages of AFM include experimenting in liquids such as water, which opens the possibility of exploring biological systems. A single molecule, such as DNA or a protein, can be suspended between the tip and surface. Lifting the tip stretches and unfolds the molecule and reveals its elastic properties, and this can be used to tell us how these biological molecules work. Similarly, temperature-sensitive cantilevers in AFM opens new doors for medical applications, enables high-resolution advanced drug design. The invention of AFM has spawned an incredible variety of measurement and manipulation tools invaluable for more than a dozen new techniques. These are already being used across every branch of science. Just one exciting example is friction force microscopy, which allows us to measure lubrication at an atomic level. Atomic force microscopy is a powerful and flexible scientific technique that continues to advance nanoscience for the benefit of society. The instrument and the many spin-off instruments it has inspired have an enduring benefit across the sciences, from physics and chemistry to biochemistry and biology.
And finally, from the smallest to the largest. For their work for the direct detection of gravitational waves, the Norwegian Academy of Science and Letters awards the 2016 Kavli Prize in Astrophysics to Ronald Graver, California Institute of Technology, USA, Kip Thorne, also at Caltech, USA, and Rainer Weiss, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, USA. Many congratulations to the 3 new astrophysics laureates. The Astrophysics Committee is chaired by Professor Mats Karlsson. And Mats, if you please.
On September the 14th, 2015, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, LIGO, detected a pulse of gravitational radiation emitted by the collision of 2 black holes. This discovery has, in a single stroke and for the first time, validated Einstein's theory of general relativity for very strong fields. It has established the nature of gravitational waves, demonstrated the existence of black holes with masses 30 times that of our Sun, and opened a new window on the universe. Gravitational radiation was predicted 100 years ago by Einstein. They consist of incredibly tiny ripples in the very fabric of 4-dimensional spacetime that emanate from rapidly moving masses and propagate at the speed of light, like ripples on the surface of a pond. Emission of gravitational radiation was inferred from the orbital decay of a single binary pulsar some 30 years ago. But the direct measurement of those tiny space-time ripples required the sustained vision and instrumental ingenuity of Draver, Thorne, and Weiss. When a gravitational wave passes through Earth, it distorts space, alternately stretching it in one dimension and compressing it at right angles. LIGO consists of 2 perpendicular arms, each 4 kilometers long, which respond to this distortion, changing in length by a tiny fraction of the diameter of a proton. Measuring such minuscule displacements is the astonishing technical feat that was accomplished by LIGO. To distinguish the passage of a gravitational wave from noise, LIGO deploys 2 identical interferometers, one in Washington State and the other in Louisiana. When the wave hit the Earth, the 2 instruments registered identical signals. The tiny effect that gravitational waves have on space led many scientists to believe they would be undetectable. In 1972, Rainer Weiss worked out the basic interferometer concept that eventually became LIGO. He provided technical leadership and devoted his extraordinary experimental acumen over the following decades, contributing to every aspect of the final apparatus. Since the 1960s, Kip Thorne had been evaluating how extreme events in the universe, such as colliding black holes and neutron stars, would generate gravitational radiation. In 1975, Thorne and Weiss began discussions of how to build Weiss's interferometer. Thorne provided scientific leadership and the vision that led to the establishment of LIGO. Ronald Draver joined Thorne and Weiss in 1979 as a 3rd founder of the project. Draver applied his experimental genius to perfecting the design and operation of interferometers. His insights led to major improvements in LIGO's capability that were essential in achieving the required sensitivity. The detection of gravitational waves is an achievement for which hundreds of scientists, engineers, and technicians around the world share credit. The ingenuity, intellectual leadership, and sheer tenacity of Draver, Thorne, and Weiss were the driving force behind this epic discovery.
Congratulations to the 9 new Kavli Prize laureates. They have all made breakthrough discoveries providing knowledge that has and will have effects far beyond their fields of investigation. Their contributions stand out as truly excellent and will inspire future generations to use their talents in the pursuit of knowledge. Our society and our culture are built on scientific discoveries, and it is a privilege to honor those who contribute the best. We look forward to seeing you in Oslo on September the 6th for the Kavli Prize award ceremony.
So there it is, 9 new Kavli Prize laureates for 2016, all celebrating pure scientific research. Many congratulations to all of them. That is it for us here in Oslo at the Academy, but the celebrations will continue over at the World Science Festival in New York, where I understand both Kip Thorne and Rainer Weiss are in the audience. I think you're going to have a very nice day.
Very good. Well, I think you're all in for a real treat now as I invite a panel of incredibly distinguished scientists up to discuss the work that we just heard being honored in Oslo. Our first panelist is a neuroscientist at the Rockefeller University in New York and a 2012 Kavli Laureate in Neuroscience. She studies the biology of the brain, asking how genes, the environment, and experience interact to give rise to flexible behaviors. Please welcome Cori Bargmann. Thanks. Our next participant is a physicist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and a 2010 MacArthur Fellow. She's been working on the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, which from now on will be called LIGO, since 1991, and was a member of the team that announced the first detection of gravitational waves earlier this year. Please welcome Nergis Mavalvala. And our final participant is an engineer at Columbia University and a 2010 MacArthur Fellow, a pioneer in the field of silicon photonics. She holds over 20 patents and is a co-founder of Picoluz, a company specializing in nonlinear silicon photonic components. Please welcome Michal Lipson. And before I start with the questions, I want to invite those who are on the satellite feed. You can submit some questions through Twitter using hashtag Kavli2016, and near the end of this, we'll feed in some of those questions as well. So I want to welcome you all to the panel and to this I hope, informal conversation. And Nergis, I want to start with you because you heard the major applause for the announcement for the prize involving LIGO. And the discovery of gravitational waves, it made big news, and it made news beyond the science community. The general public, the New York Times had it on the front page. Why is the discovery so significant, and why do you think it resonated so much with the public as a whole?
So I think that's a good question. So the significance to the scientific community are things we just heard about opening a new window into the universe, which, by the way, I believe was coined by Kip Thorne as a good sales pitch for why, 40 years ago when we hardly knew what we were doing, well, they hardly knew what they were doing, we should do this. And so I think the scientific benefits are just that you can really look out into the universe with a tool you've never had before. So that's nice. Now, why did it take over sort of the public and the media? I think in part, certainly this is my opinion, in part because it's such a compelling story as well. It's a story not just of scientific discovery, but of how science is done on this huge scale, right? 40 years, nearly $1 billion, over 1,000 scientists. Putting that all together is a pretty neat story. So I think that caught on with people as well. And come on, everybody loves black holes, right? So that helps.
Very good. So this gives us a new window into the universe. One of the questions that's been raised is, will you be able to detect gravitational waves from the Big Bang?
Oh, I'm afraid to say that with Ray Weiss in the room, because so I think all yes. So why is the Big Bang such a special thing to aspire to using gravitational waves? So it turns out light is actually very friendly. Every time light meets matter, it scatters, it disperses, it changes its properties. So if you look at light from the distant universe, it's not the most reliable messenger necessarily. And certainly at the time of the Big Bang and shortly afterwards, the universe was so hot and dense that light didn't escape. In fact, it took about 400,000 years before, as the universe expanded and cooled, before light could stream to us. So if you look back to the beginnings of the universe with light, which is all we've done so far, time starts at 400,000 years. That's what you can see. Gravitational waves, on the other hand, they're extremely aloof. They interact with matter extremely weakly. It's a little bit like going to a party with an introvert. You say goodbye and you leave, right? You don't have to stop at every person and say hello and goodbye. So same thing with gravitational waves. They just kind of come to us from that very first, earliest moments after the Big Bang, sort of unobscured and preserved. So if you want to look back to the earliest moments of after the Big Bang, that's your messenger.
Yeah.
It's a hard measurement, though. I don't think we have instruments even in the next generation that would be able to do that. But maybe with ingenuity we could.
Well, when it comes to ingenuity and designing instruments, you have pretty incredible skills. I wondered if you could share the story of how you got your job with Ray Weiss and what sold him on you.
So I met Ray Weiss in 1991. I was a brand new graduate student at MIT, and I actually was looking for a research group. It wasn't like I had heard about gravitational waves, and in fact I had never had. And so I went to see him looking for a new group, and so in those days, Ray, he used to smoke a pipe, and he would sit on his desk with his feet propped up like that, and that's what he did. And he asked me actually a question that I was quite perplexed by at the time. We talked for briefly, and then he said, well, what do you know? I think that's how the question went. And I was like, strange question. So, I was brand new grad student. I'd just taken all these classes. So I started rattling off, well, I just did quantum mechanics and stat mech, and he stopped me right there. I don't care about any of that. He said, what do you know how to do? What do you like to do in the lab? And then I sort of remembered, okay, I know how to build electronic circuits. I know how to use a machine shop. I know how to repair bicycles. And he kind of looked at me and said, you're okay, you can come work for me. And so that's how it began. And then he told me what he was trying to do, and I thought it was totally insane. Measuring gravitational waves that had never been seen before. And to do that, you needed to make measurements that were 1,000 times smaller than the size of a proton. I was just like, this is crazy. So that's how it started for me personally. But it says a lot about Ray. He's always been driven by, what do people have passion for?
Yeah.
So.
And now that gravitational waves have been detected, what's next for you? I mean, is the thrill gone now that it's been accomplished, or do you continue in this area?
We have so much still left to do. I mean, we've really just uncovered the very first signal. I mean, the universe is humming with signals that we have to pick up. So improving the instruments, improving our theoretical understanding, which Kip, of course, was instrumental in getting off the ground. Kip Thorne really gave us the first time we actually understood that these signals are out there and measurable came really from the work of Kip, the measurable part, and he's been an advocate for that. So yeah, we have lots to do. So for me personally, yes, there's still much more work to do.
Thank you very much. I want to shift to talk about nanoscience here, and the Kavli Prize in Nanoscience is being given this year for discovering how to manipulate and image individual atoms. What does this allow scientists to do that they couldn't do before?
So France has actually talked about the infrastructure that is in place now for nanoscience, and that has been actually, NSF has been funding all those centers to actually make devices built from scratch, almost atom by atom, and this has been going on for, past at least 20 years. There is not a single center without this AFM, atomic force microscope. This is a must, is a tool that all of us use all the time. So it's completely enabled nanotechnology to be what it is today. And actually today, if you look at the literature, papers published in 2016, 2015, AFM is still innovating. So there is still new stuff that you could do with these machines.
And can you, all right, I'm not a basic scientist, can you make this real? What are some practical applications for this basic technology?
I can give you an application for my own lab, right? I want to send light in little wires. These are basically lithographically defined wires. And I want them to be perfectly straight. If there is one atom that is off the grid, light will just go away. It will scatter, okay? So I think I know how to do it. But I have no way of measuring, except if I go and put it under the AFM. And the AFM will actually tell me if all the atoms are aligned just right. So yeah, this is just an example, but there's just so many. Yep.
Now, your own work is in nanophotonics, and that has application in a wide variety of fields. Can you talk a little bit about the interdisciplinary nature of the work that you do, and I think the work that all of you do?
Yeah, so especially silicon photonics, which is the field that my group works on, is very interdisciplinary, and I have something for you, Cori. So silicon photonics started with the goal of revolutionizing computers and making them basically eliminate the problem of heat. All computers today suffer from heat dissipation, and light could make them run faster without any heat. But it became so successful, this field, that now you can take gigantic system, microscopes, and make them all on a tiny little silicon chip, just like you make today electronics. And this is, in the past 10 years, an incredibly fast-moving field. Any optics you see today, you can do it on a chip. And you can have microcontrollers that basically change that on demand with no moving part. This is technology extremely exciting and novel. So now there are all those fields that are asking, okay, what can you do for us? I mean, anything that uses optics can use this silicon photon. We are very excited at putting it into neuroscience applications, like, for example, optogenetics, exciting, making basically all the optics that you know that is large, miniaturizing it and controlling it.
Fascinating. I read that your work may have some application in terms of reducing energy costs. Can you explain that?
Absolutely, because the goal of silicon photonics is to decrease the power, but power is really energy. It's actually, if you think about data centers like Google and where are they located? They are always on rivers. So cooling is a big issue. Now it turns out if you actually replace all the copper wires with optical wires inside the computers, and replace the large copper wires between the computers with fibers, you can decrease the energy consumption very, very significantly. So we're all very excited about that, and silicon photonics is being introducing right now in data centers.
Fascinating. Well, Cori, I want to bring you into the conversation. You were a member of the Kavli Prize Committee in Neuroscience and helped decide who to recognize this year among your peers. And when you look at the work of this year's laureates, what did it show us that hadn't been demonstrated before?
Well, I want to start answering that question by actually pointing out that two of the giants of neuroscience are in the room with us today, who really started the fields that our laureates are being recognized in today, and those are Torsten Wiesel from the Rockefeller University, who together with David Hubel developed our understanding of sensory systems in the visual cortex, and Eric Kandel from Columbia University, who did the first work understanding the molecular and physiological mechanisms of learning in any animal. And I'd like to... And what the 3 Kavli Prize winners in neuroscience did this year was to unify the different kinds of remodeling of the nervous system that occurs with respect to activity across all different scales of time and space in the nervous system. So on the one hand, you have Eve Marder working in a tiny nervous system, looking at single neurons. And what she discovered is the way that the nervous system can remodel itself very rapidly using different kinds of neuromodulators, chemical cues, that allow one little group of neurons to carry out different functions under different circumstances. And then to turn that back around and realize that that was reversible and that the system would maintain its stability even as it changed under different kinds of circumstances. And this idea of flexibility in the nervous system is really important. It goes against the idea of the nervous system as something that just sits there in a fixed anatomical way, that just acts as an information processing system that takes in information and spews out an answer at the end. It's constantly rewiring itself very quickly to solve problems at hand. And then at the opposite extreme, we have the work of Carla Schatz, who showed that activity is not just something that comes into the nervous system from instant to instant, but that from the earliest moments of development, the activity of the nervous system is shaping the connections that it forms. So again, linking structure and function of the nervous system during development to show that patterns of activity in the nervous system, before a mammal is even born, before a child is born, there is activity in the eye that helps to wire up the processes, the systems between the eye and the brain. And right in the middle sits Mike Mersnick, who studies how sensory systems remodel in real time to create new capabilities based on our experiences. And his work, many of you will know the homunculus, the image that appears in the brain, which represents an anatomical equivalent of body image. You have a little picture of the human being mapped out in different brain regions with a face and a monstrous tongue and hands and various limbs. And this is what you might think of as a developmental pattern. It looks very similar in all people, but Mike Mersnick showed that this pattern can be rewired based on your experience in a time frame intermediate between Eve Marder's very rapid minute-to-minute time frame and Carla Schatz's very early in development, lifelong time frame. That, for example, if you tape 2 fingers together, after a couple of weeks, the homunculus thinks you only have 1 finger. And conversely, if in a person whose arm is in a cast, they sort of lose some representation of that, but within a few weeks, the other arm and hand becomes more sensitive and expands and becomes more precise. And this sort of time frame, intermediate time frame, turns out to be really important for helping the brain rewire in response to injury and insult or in response to challenges. And Mike Mersnick very specifically applied this in the sense of hearing to help us understand how the brain rewires itself in response to hearing challenges that allow us to recover from hearing injury using cochlear implants. So your ear is a 10,000 channel recorder of sound. And when it's damaged, you lose your ability to understand speech. But Mike showed that if you could only detect a few wavelengths of sound, you would expand those in your brain. The homunculus of your ear, in a sense, in the hearing system, would expand what it could hear, and therefore a simple channel using just 16 channels instead of 10,000 is sufficient for people to relearn speech and to recommunicate using just simple wires instead of this complex biological mechanism. So we can see how the brain rewires itself on all these different scales to create function.
It's fascinating. I'm a pediatrician, and in pediatrics we talk about these critical periods early on where the brain is very plastic and you can see these changes, but the teaching had always been that as you get older, you lose that ability. What does this work say about the potential to recover from fairly devastating brain injuries?
Yeah, Mike Mersnick in particular defined what it took to rewire brains to sort of recreate those openings of critical periods. I'm losing sound. It's okay. But he showed that, in fact, it is true that the adult brain is not as ravenous for change as the young brain, but that you can rewire, for example, your sense of hearing, and that there are important cues from attention, so something needs to be important, and that there are important cues from neuromodulators, exactly those minute-to-minute rewirers of neural activity that Eve Marder had studied that could reconfigure circuits. And so, for example, now people in stroke recovery will use some of those ideas that emerged directly from this work to try to stimulate the formation of new connections and stimulate plasticity.
Fascinating. So I want to ask you a question about your own work. And you've spent decades working on a very simple neural system, that of a nematode with 302 neurons. What can working on such a simple system tell us about the human brain? Why spend so long focusing on that system?
I think the first thing to know about all brains is that they're built from the same pieces. That I think it's a surprise even to those of us who study simple animals that the genes that are used to build simple nervous systems are really the same genes that are used to build complex nervous systems. That if you study a complex human disorder like schizophrenia or autism or dyslexia, and you find the underlying genetic risk factors, those genes are present in worms. Now, obviously, worms cannot read, but it just shows you that the same building blocks are being used. And so we can use simple brains to understand what those genes are good at doing and how they're put together to generate more complex functions, and then try to extend those to understand what they're doing in much, much more complex brains. We can try to study those genes in 302 neurons to see what they're doing and where. Studying it in the 86 billion neurons of the human brain is substantially more challenging.
Fascinating. Thinking again about clinical applications, the work that is being honored today, what do you see that having applications for clinically going forward?
I think the recognition of the different forms of plasticity that exist in the brain, the different forms of remodeling that occur in the brain, is of critical importance to really all aspects of neurology and psychiatry. It tells us something about what the repair systems are in the normal brain, and it also tells us something about how processes go awry because of the environment and experience as well. The giant prescription drug epidemic we're seeing now with painkillers in the United States represents a form of plasticity in the brain that we all wish to counteract and prevent. So I think that there's really no element of the encouraging word is that the brain can remodel and can recover from many very serious injuries. The discouraging fact is that the brain is injured all the time and that we need to try to stay ahead of that and these problems.
Well, I want to pull you all in to the conversation a little bit, but I read a very interesting interview that Michal and Nergis had when you both won the MacArthur Award. And it was a conversation with the two of you. You hadn't met before. But over the course of this interview, you working in nanoscience and you working with gravitational waves found all of these connections between your work and how it could influence each other. And the question for all of you is, how frequently are conversations across fields taking place, and what's the value and how do you encourage that to take place more?
I think so I'll start, Michal. So, most of us, we go to professional venues in our own fields. And so physicists talk to physicists, and then astrophysicists talk to astrophysicists. So it gets pretty narrow. So I think venues like this, when Michal and we got together over the MacArthur, or what the Kavli does, when you bring multiple fields together, it's just much more fertile. So I was thinking about, as Cori was speaking about, working with the nematode and then going to say a human system. I mean, when we built when LIGO was built, I mean, LIGO is this 4-kilometer-long instrument with literally tens of thousands of signals to take care of. We started with smaller, meter or even centimeters long systems in our labs first, and that's part of what took those 40 years, is starting to understand how it's done. So I think in all of our practices, whether it's the actual science that we do or the techniques that we use, there is a huge amount of overlap. And so we had a lot of fun discovering the things we have in common, even though we are from quite different worlds.
But I should say that we are not that different worlds, because it's a little not fair, the example, because we both study light. Mm-hmm. But in general, I would say that physics, with physics, is pretty easy to go across different disciplines. When I was choosing a career, my father is a physicist. I wanted to do this or that, very different things. He said, okay, just do your physics degree, and then you can do anything. Mm-hmm. So, even neuroscience, maybe.
Yeah. I think my dad said, learn typing, and then you can do anything. Different setting. But it brings me to the next topic that I want to get to, and I do want to spend a little time talking about women in science and how you all got to where you are. And Michal, I've read about your background with physics in your family, and that was very important for you in terms of seeing that as a potential career. And Cori, I read you came from a very academic background as well, and that those things were very important to you. But then, Nergis, your background was not academic at all. So, I'd love for you each to reflect on that and on your background and how it either helped you or didn't pursue a career in science. And
well, okay, I can. We were just talking with Alan before that. My statistics, you are completely off the charts of my statistics, but if you look at least women in physics, the absolute vast majority come from families, fathers usually, that are either physicists or engineers. And that's a sign that we're still not there, that you needed a father. What's more mentor than that, right? You needed a father to encourage you. So I really admire you.
Well, I have to say for me that it's not so different. Of course, my parents are not scientists or academics, very supportive of education. But I've had many mentors, and they're in the room here even, certainly, Ray and Kip. Barry Barish is sitting over here, who was, head of LIGO lab when I was a postdoc. And so there's the mentoring piece of it, which is, it can come from your family. And in mine, it just came, the mentoring in my family was education is important, educate yourself. And it didn't matter what. And then came, once physics was interesting, these mentors took over. So maybe I'm not such an outlier, because I've had that experience, but just in different ways. Yeah. And so, yeah.
Cori?
So no one in my family has had a real job in generations. My father was a professor.
Fantastic.
My sister was a professor. My other sister is a professor. Yeah. So it's easy for me. But I want to say in biology, we already have a situation where 50% of the PhDs are going to young women. Mm-hmm. And yet we're losing them before they go further in their careers as professors. And so I think we need to look at ourselves right here where we are. We have the talent, we have the interest, we have people coming in, and we need to make sure that they stay in. And one thing that I do think about, having come from an academic environment, and this isn't just true for women, it's true for lots of people in this country, is that there's a certain way of talking and a certain way of presenting yourself, and a certain sort of facility in academic environments that coming from that environment. And I have people that I work with now, students, who are the first people in their families to go to college, let alone to graduate school. And maybe they don't have quite that verbal polish, but let me tell you, they are smart and they have grit and determination and motivation. And I think we need to keep those people in science as well. We need to be opening our eyes to a whole set of people who will be great scientists. That, you know, it's our job as professors to make sure that we're finding that talent and letting people express that talent and recognizing that talent even when it doesn't come with all of this that goes with it. So
Very good point.
You've all talked about the importance of mentorship in your own careers and lives. Do you think it's going to make a difference now that there are more women to serve in the role as mentors?
I think definitely. I think part of what I think is really important in making the change is the numbers have to keep up. When there are more women in visible roles in any field, it draws more young women in. And so I think that's a very important thing, to keep the numbers growing so that people, and in invisible ways. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you want those young women, even if it's not an active role of, hopefully it is, but even if it's not, just for them to see that, yes, there are more, you can have a family, you can, you know, it's a completely a reasonable path to pursue.
I remember every woman who gave a seminar at MIT when I was a graduate student. I remember the shoes Ruth Lehman wore to her job interview. I remember, you know, I do think that it makes a difference to be able to look out and see people that are successful and to be able to think to yourself, I could be like that.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
It did for me.
And sometimes it's just going on subconsciously. Like, one of the most remarkable types of emails I get out of the blue is a former student, or sometimes even a perfect stranger, who simply writes to say, you know, thank you, you're a role model for me. And I'm thinking to myself, me? I just do what I love. How can this be? But now I've come to understand, just by being out there, people are gaining something from it. And it's a powerful thing, and something to, to nurture.
Well, we have a number of questions that have come in from the audience that's watching the live stream, and this is one that comes out of what you were just saying, and it's clear to me you're all not just passionate about science, but you are able to communicate your passion. And this question is, what advice could you give on communicating a love of science to the public? Who'd like to take that?
Can we turn that over to Alan Alda, sitting at the table here, who has really been spectacular at helping to teach scientists how to communicate with non-scientific audiences?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alan, do you want to say something on that?
I think you're all brilliant.
For those who are in the live stream, he thinks that they're all brilliant.
Yeah. So I'll take one piece of that. So one of the things that I think we don't teach our students and ourselves even enough, and I've learned to start to do this, is to help young people develop what I call an elevator pitch. You're in an elevator, you have half a minute to tell someone what you do. You meet someone and you never know how that will convert into something good. But to just learn to communicate what you do to someone you meet randomly who's not in your field, and do it in a minute.
Yeah.
So the elevator pitch, I think that's one way to go.
Excellent.
So.
You do well at ABC News, where we basically are given that amount of time to explain science. This is just for the room, right? Nergis, a bit of a technical question for you from the live stream. Do gravitational waves from multiple sources interfere? And if so, how do you distinguish between sources?
Yes, so that's a really good question. They could, but most of the sources that we look at are actually quite independent of each other, so they don't interfere, they're just an incoherent sum. And what that means is you can just imagine a room full of voices speaking, and they're not in any way adding up to anything greater than the sum. They're just a cacophony, and that's what we hear. So different sources going off are being recorded in our instruments, and sometimes, especially once the instruments get sensitive enough, they'll be recording them at the same time, and then we'll have to decouple these individual sounds or sources, but they're not really going to interfere because they're too independent of each other.
Cori, this question is for you, and it's from Twitter. What future developments in neuroscience are you most looking forward to?
Figuring out how the brain works.
Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit, just briefly, about the efforts that you're involved in around that?
Yeah, so several people in the room and the Kavli Foundation was really instrumental in this, have been involved in helping to organize and launch the Brain Initiative, which has been a nationwide private-public partnership, including the National Science Foundation, as France mentioned, the National Institutes of Health, DARPA, private groups like Kavli, even some people from well into the private sector like Intel, who are trying to think about ways of both developing new technologies, developing the measurement tools we would need to see what we want to see in the brain, whether optically or through other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum.
But gravity won't work for that, I think.
Yeah.
But analogies.
Yeah. But it's really a cooperation. It's a place where not only different scientists work together, but insights from whole different fields of science come together in surprising ways. So for example, adaptive optics is a technique that was developed in astrophysics to be able to see distant galaxies through the fuzzy atmosphere. Well, it turns out that's also a really useful tool for being able to detect optical signal through the fuzzy brain. It's a microscope instead of a telescope, but it's a very similar problem in finding a signal in a murky background. And similarly, the kinds of miniaturization technologies are really important for being able to develop things like endoscopes, miniature microscopes that let people look deep within the brain at complex structures. And so part of the mission of the Brain Initiatives, the N in BRAIN stands for neurotechnology, has been bringing together people from these different technological areas to solve the big problems. That in the same way that LIGO required instrumentation to answer a profound scientific question, answering the profound questions of the brain are going to require instrumentation as well as creativity and imagination.
Here's another question for you, Nergis. If gravitational waves can only tell us about the past, why are they important?
So it turns out every time we look into the universe, we are learning only about the past, because it takes light a finite amount of time to travel to us. Even our own sun, we look at our sun and we admire it, and it turns out we're looking at something that was 8 minutes in the past, because it took, the light that we see left the sun 8 minutes ago. And so astronomy is actually a study of the past, if you will, unless it's really in our neighborhood. And like I said, even our sun, right in our neighborhood, it's a thing of the past. So why bother? It's because this is how we construct the history of our universe. This is how we learn where we came from. And eventually, because of the laws of physics and other things, it can tell us where we're going. And so it's really important, even though almost all of it is, everything we observe are relics.
Another question from Twitter. Science can be very competitive. How can we encourage individual scientists to work together to make these kind of big discoveries?
I think actually the NSF even knocked some heads, is my understanding, in the process of getting the LIGO people to work together. I think that there was I'm getting a nod over there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there's a role. I think that you can convince really smart, really competitive people to work together, because your real competition is ignorance. Mm-hmm. And if you can create places where people are going to get credit, where people are going to be supported, where you're not pitting them against each other, a smart competitor can really sharpen your thinking and help you to do better work than you would do otherwise. I don't think it's impossible.
But there are also several formal settings that are being introduced. I mean, in all agencies, NSF has several of them. Even Kavli has some efforts now on bringing people completely different fields, and that helps. I mean, if you bring the resources, then it does motivate.
I think there's even a word coined for it called a collabetition, which is a collaboration and a competition in one, right? And so I think the other thing that's really important is if you're driven by the same end goal of discovering some passion, a passion for some answer you're seeking, then you have to sort of team up with people, because I mean, I think, you know, the science we're doing today compared to the science people were doing a few hundred years ago, it's getting more complex. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So we have to really use collective resources. So.
And a last Twitter question. I note an all-female panel. What does this indicate for gender equality in the sciences? Is this a sign that the sciences are now equal?
Oh, it's completely women-dominated.
I think we hit that question a little earlier as well. And, Cori, you are the one panelist who is a Kavli Laureate, and I just wanted to see if you could reflect on receiving the Kavli Prize and how that has influenced you and your work.
I think it's a fantastic recognition of science to be able to highlight the accomplishments that are made in this way. And you know, to some extent it's a celebration of individuals and their contributions, but to some extent it's really a celebration of knowledge and the way that knowledge increases, and how before we knew something and now we know something more. And it highlights that, it brings it out to the community as a whole. It highlights the excitement of that. I think that was something that Fred Kavli himself really showed. I remember at the Kavli Prize the year 2012 when I was there, Fred gave a talk about how exoplanets were being discovered in, around many different stars, and how that was going to help us to discover life elsewhere in the universe. He was genuinely excited by that prospect, and I think most human beings share a sense of wonder and discovery if it's presented to them. And I think the Kavli Prizes recognize wonderful scientists, recognize wonderful accomplishments, but also bring science to the larger world in ways that allow the world to share it.
I want to thank France Córdova for her earlier remarks, and our three incredible panelists for sharing their experience and insight on today's prizes. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you. That was fun.